Hi there, and welcome to the Warrior Monk Resilience Podcast, and where we discuss topics about creativity, confidence, and resilience. And this week's topic is about performing while injured without betraying yourself. So, some of the things I'm going to talk about is me doing my doors for solar consulting as I do a push series, and in injuring myself, having to try to continue as much as possible, in having to just force myself to continue. It wasn't even try at this point. It was like force myself to continue. There's no options. I must continue. There's no way I can leave here without a deal. Was my mindset to getting the deal, which in the end I didn't get. But having learned the lessons in having to continue regardless, are some of the things that I'm going to discuss about. One of the things is about injury doesn't remove responsibility. Because of my commitment to doing the whole push series, I said yes to it, that I would do the whole push series. I took as much time as possible as I could with the energy that I had to put as much time to getting on the doors and meeting people. And then during the winter, it's very difficult. I was told that it was the most difficult period of time, or possibly in the impossible range of difficult. And in doing that, doing the impossible of just showing up and going to each door, I met myself with frustration. At the end of the day, it would turn into things about like, what am I doing wrong? How do I fix this stuff? What the hell am I supposed to do about this? Because I'm following the script to the best of my ability, and yeah, maybe I'm not as good right now as to be outstanding in this industry, but not trying to also turn myself into, I can't even say the word, but in that sense of suck, having to feel that way rather than to say that I'm learning. I did one person told me about this and was like, I did what I thought was right, and I had good intentions in it, and then because I have good intentions in it, trying to get myself psyched back up to show up the next day and the next day, knowing that I meet a bunch of no's, knowing that I meet a lot of angry people, knowing that, not a lot actually, it was only a couple people really, a couple angry people, and having to continue from that rather than to give in to this person doesn't like it, so that means it must not be really that good, or this person doesn't, and trying to keep my belief in the idea that this is for somebody. I don't know who yet, but it's for someone, and someone is in this area that has that needs this. And what can I do to bring the energy in still going back to try to find this maybe two people in this neighborhood that possibly want this deal. And so in the real challenge of having to show up is just managing that. After about 11 days, and it was still like my old me would work out 3 hours a day, and then I had not done long distance walking for a long time, so I went from maybe walking 2,000 steps a day, 4,000 steps a day to 16,000 steps. And on my longest day, I had walked 20,000 steps, and I really felt it in my knees, and I could not eat as much as I needed to. I was on MREs, so that's 1,100 to 1,300 calories. I'm probably burning anywhere around 2,800 calories to somewhere around there. I'm just guesstimating, because at the same time I was still doing like powerlifting workouts and doing like intense hit boxing to because the other part of the goal was to lose weight. It was to lose like 20 pounds. as soon as possible. And I had achieved the goal, but I mean, going in, I already had like previous issues with my left knee, kind of caving in, and I had used K-tape, and at some point the K-tape stopped failing, and I had used a backpack to ruck these, to try to get more calories burned, so that I could lose more weight faster without having to run instead or add more hours to my walking. Instead of like walking 4 hours, I'd walk 8 hours, and that weighed on me. So in the last like 3 days, I was like, I can barely walk. I am like doing like a half step of walking to each place, and I still kept going because like this in me was like, no, I don't quit. I must win, and I must continue. And so the hardest part about it wasn't the pain, it was the limitation afterwards of like, well, my knee is actually starting to cave in and I can't carry this backpack anymore. And the pain was so unbearable that like up to now, that was about a month ago, and now we're into January, and to the point where like my hip was literally spasming on the inside, and I was like, yeah, I gotta stop. I mean, in having to like actually having to call it quits. It was like, but we're in a push series. Right now, and I'm supposed to go another 3 weeks straight of trying to find deals. And I was like, I wrote a thing about this earlier in my content where I was like, you know, I gotta take a break. And I talked to myself and I was like, well, what do you want, Josh? Do you want 3 days of recovery or 6 months of post-op surgery to another 18 months of post-op surgery waiting for your knee to get better? And in having to balance that of like having to like, okay, well, I can keep going until I'm in crutches and a wheelchair, but then where would I go then? That's not sustainability. That's not going the distance. That's like sprinting till my knees literally fall apart. And in having to do that and just trying to, like, I struggled with things. I mean, this wasn't so much about the injury as much as my brain saying that I'm not keeping a promise to myself that I said I would make. And in thinking about that, like, well, what is the promise that I need to make with myself that's more consistent with something that I can achieve? Because it doesn't matter if I'm not getting enough leads, if I can't go back out and try to fill up my lead funnel, then it doesn't matter if we're in a push series. I mean, even that, it's like some amount of people pleasing of like, I'm letting my team down, I'm letting myself down, and wanting to be there because I'm saying I know I can do better. And this was like an old pattern too of like, I know I can do better, but like, when can I do better? I know that I'm very well at being able to just show up and constantly knock these doors and hear a bunch of no's. The biggest thing is that I need to take care of myself now. Something that they leave on our calendar is like, take care of yourself, and having to balance that, like, well, I need you to show up. No, I need to take care of myself. I need to take care of myself because if my health goes, if I'm in a wheelchair, I mean, I've done it before. Like when the first time when I messed up my knee, I was still just angry rage bomb of like trying to sprint in crutches, like literally like just going with crutches, and everyone was like, oh, that sucks. Oh, I'm like, I'm loving it right now. I'm about to do like wheelies in my crutches, like I'm about to like do donuts with it, like spin around and do a 720. But like that sort of mentality now I can't really carry with me, because it's like, okay, well, how can I pace myself in such a way that I'm not making this worse? Previous injury had my knee swollen like a lake. And I went to the doctor. They were like, there's so much fluid in here, it looks like you have a lake in your knee. I don't know with this leg because I haven't gotten an MRI, but it seems like the swelling has gone down. So I'm learning, at least from the last time, of just not pushing it past to the point where I'm like, I'm running, I don't care that it's breaking. I'm running, all over the place in San Francisco, and I don't care. Like, no, I care. How can I, like give myself enough time to recover and keep moving forward. So in that, it was like, well, there was a line between awareness and denial. And being in denial, I mean, like, it's something I think I get from my mom on an overload, where it's like, my mom's never willing to admit that she's injured. My mom's never willing to admit that she's disabled. And to some extent, like, saying that I'm disabled, like, yeah, I cannot say that shit. Like, you know, like, I never say that. Like, I'm capable, not disabled. So, like that. But to the extent of also respecting that, I cannot walk my knees to the bone. If I don't find a way to take a break and give myself enough time somehow to allow my injuries to heal so that they can continue. I want to work out for the rest of my life. I don't want to be limited by the idea that I burnt myself out for 20 years, from 20 to 50 or something, and then now all of a sudden at 50 I can't do anything. Because people that I look up to, like Goggins, and Tony Robbins, and even Bruce Lee. I mean, Bruce Lee had broken his back in a motorcycle accident and rehabbed it. You know, like some people had told me before that, oh, well, the minute you break your back, you're going to be hunched over. You're never going to, get your posture back and things. And to some extent, it's like, well, what do I want to create? Because in doing physical therapy, I was able to go from this to this and standing up straight. And people like Jim Quick had showed me that the limits are a lot in your mind, more than they are in the rest of your head or in the pain that you have. But in respecting the amount of pain that is going on, it has allowed me to continue moving forward without without breaking myself completely. And even then, pushing past the limits of like those sorts of things, it's like, well, if I'm pushing past my limits, because like 2 days ago I was like, I can't walk. My hip is like spasming so hard that it hurts to walk on ground. And I had to go slow. I was rereading the book Embrace the Suck and No Hero, both Navy SEAL books about different Navy SEALs who was in training. And there was this chapter about confidence, where this guy was like they have this exercise where you have to swim in like aggressive and dolphin-infested waters and sharks and stuff. And if you made the wrong move, that they would just eat you up and spit you out, or like you tear into your wetsuit, you get hypothermia, you're bleeding, you're dead. And they had to also travel blind. Like they were. It's kind of like a firefighter course. Like if you at the end of a firefighter course, you're having to crawl in this crawl space. There's smoke everywhere. It's 110 degrees, and you can't see where you're going, and you just have to keep crawling and crawling until you slowly make it out. The same thing. It was underwater. It's cold. It's not hot. It's cold, and they're having to just feel their way through the course because there's these pylons that are in the way. So in some ways they're in the way. In other ways they're also helping track where you're going, because if there was no pylon there and it was just straight water, like in the same way of pathfinding, like you would possibly walk around in a circle like the whole time and not get out of the forest if you were pathfinding. In the same way you wouldn't get to the ship if there weren't those obstacles in the way, especially blind, I would say. So like in thinking about that though, it's like those things of having to go slower. I had to walk and lower my center of gravity until like my hips stopped throbbing, like yesterday at least, and it was great because then I was able to stand up straight and still be able to move. The other issue is still having to accept the limit that this other knee is not wanting to go 7 miles at this moment, which is hard to take. And now there's this hard decision of like, well, how am I going to fill in the gap of that my body is saying just like slow down, and the work demands that I do more, and figure out a way from there. I mean, I don't know what it is right now, just because it's like, well, this is just unfolding as it goes, and I don't want to label it as anything or think of things like that, but having to figure out where to go from there. And I think the other part is like that emergency effort can't become a lifestyle, because I had spent a lot of my life living life in a crisis. Like it just everything felt like a crisis every time, because of having to be always attentive, always on time, perfectionism. I mean, emergency effort can feel like perfectionism, where like if everything's an emergency, then there's no time to plan. There's no time to you just go with whatever you got and just do it. Um, and and even though short-term sacrifices aren't necessary, like as a homeless person before, I had to short-term plan a lot, and I had to sacrifice long-term planning because every day was so uncertain. I didn't know where my next paycheck was going to come from, and in being homeless before, I used to give rides to the homeless people, and they would give me stuff. Like some people would give me a sandwich, some people would give me groceries, some people would actually pay me gas money, and that was how I was able to make a little bit extra money, and by talking to people as well. Like in the homeless shelter, I was able to get a job as a security guard um, for a while, and go from there. And talking to those people, I was able to at least do some sort of trade. That's not so much what this is about. It's like the injury part of like emergency effort can't become a lifestyle, because long-term effort, sustainable effort, is knowing your timeline, and wanting to keep that timeline as much as possible. A lot of uncertainty can happen, and a lot of things can say, well, because it's so uncertain, I shouldn't plan. But there should still be like a framework plan on where to go next. Because if there isn't, then it can get. I mean, like with doing career goals, like if there isn't, then stay in things way longer than they need to be. And I'm guilty of that. I stayed in Uber too long, and I gave myself a deadline. Even in this, giving myself a deadline, and it's like my body is trying to tell me to stop. Um, and and it's like, where do you go there? Because I promised I get these many deals, and it's a lot harder, and I have to make friends, and I have to go and create this network, a group of people, and all of these things. I mean, they don't unfold themselves right now, but in terms of trying to find something through the long-term planning of where to go next, instead of burning out, re-injuring my mind, my body, trying to scar myself with failure, in the idea that, well, this is it, like, because it's never it. Like, as long as I'm still alive, it's never finished. There's a Navy SEAL motto called like, never out of the fight, and regardless of what's happening, I'm never out of the fight. And I used to think about like, oh, you're never out of the fight, but instead of positive, like, you're never out of the fight. No matter how messed up things get, no matter what problems arise, the things that seem like everything's going down, you still feel like it's the launch pad to going up. And in thinking about that, it goes to this idea of discipline doesn't disappear when you slow down. So it can look like restraint. It can look like lazy to some people. It can look like I'm just not doing enough. But that's where my personal checklist comes in, and is like, well, I'm doing more with less, and I'm controlling the controllables, because in every day I have to control the controllables. I'm not responsible for other people's emotions. I'm not responsible for um, whatever actions that I've done that have also affected people. If it doesn't, if there's no meaningful way towards it. Like if I'm doing doors, I can't like blame myself that this person came off this way because of the label that we get as consultants or salespeople, in that sense. And even of that, of like, or that, in the same way that if I had a negative label as for having mental health challenges or physical challenges, I can't let that slow me down in that same way too. And it's not an excuse to be undisciplined. It's not an excuse to just let myself go crazy and do whatever I want at times. I mean, because at times it's like, oh, it's cool to just let go, but at the same time, it's like still doing less enough to have something on the board. Like where I got lost in that, of like, well, doing enough to have something on the board. Regardless, I mean, it doesn't have to be first place. I'm also very competitive. I used to be a lot more competitive, where I'm like, I need to be number one. And in some ways, it's like, well, because I've been like, had all A's, had all of these things that don't translate into the next skill set that I'm working on, because it's like that reputation was with something else that, and it clears, but in my own personal checklist of things, it's like, well, it's like the cookie jar thing that David Goggins talks about. Like, it's a cookie that I can go back to in my head to remind myself that no matter how much I'm failing at this moment, that there are things that I can go back to. Losing going from 248 pounds to 169 pounds, getting my 2+1 STEM scholarship, writing a grant that got me a grant, like, those sorts of things, or just things that I was able to create or do that were of my own doing that no one else can take away. Because at times it's like, well, people will take away. And that's okay to some extent, because it is overwhelming to think about, like, there's all this success and accolades, but it's like, well, what are you doing now? And it's like, well, and what I'm doing now is thinking about something to keep my head from imploding, instead of refocusing on, well, what do I need to do now? And this is self-soothing. It's rebuilding my self-worth, rather than caving into the idea that I can't do, like, that it's not possible. No, it is possible. And how much time do I have to do? I think a lot of things still come to reps and sets, and how many reps and it goes back into that framework too, of like, how many reps did I have to do? How many sets did I have to do to lift heavy weight? I did not start at like 0 to 225 pounds, let it crush me. Like, at times I got ego driven. And even that was like, well, it's like an ego lift. That's where I can at least relate it, where I'm like, I'm trying to ego lift right now, and I'm not paying attention to the form that I'm doing. I'm not paying attention to the things that I need in order for my body to effortlessly, as much as possible. I mean, it's still like, if you're lifting at your 1 rep max, to push that up, and it takes everything. Versus like the training times, it can never always be a 1 rep max. The training at times have to have times for rest, times to pace myself, times to also feel like what it's like to lift lightweight towards heavyweight. And in other ways to just be more mindful in my lift. I think that's where I usually am now with lifting. It's like, it's a mindfulness thing to me, because I can focus on something that isn't about anybody else. It's just about me, and being able to take action to lifting weight, or to moving a specific way, or rebuilding, stabilizing my own body. And this builds continuing honesty that builds deeper self-trust with myself. And in building self-trust with myself, it's like, well, I don't have to pretend I'm okay. I'm not quitting. I'm adjusting without self-contempt too. I'm taking out the self-contempt that before I had to yell at myself or tell myself I was stupid, or like, you're an idiot, like, whatever, effing do it, rather than just like, hey, let's think about this for a moment with myself. Let's think about this for a moment, and where are we trying to go? It's a replanning. It's a debrief action where it's like, okay, well, is this working out right now? Let's try to figure out how we can, scale back a little so that we can scale forward later. And in building deeper self-trust, it also removes the amount of need for for outside validation, I think, or motivation as well, because if it's no longer about do I feel good enough to do something today. And there's also a set point of like, it doesn't have to be, I don't have to wait all day, like a whole day at times, to feel good. I can feel bad, and as I go, feel better about it. And those are some of the things I think about, like as being injured and striving for sustainability now. Sustainability in that sense of like, how do I keep continuing rather than just quitting? Because I've quit a lot of times before, and quitting, getting suicidal, getting too depressed to do anything, I lost a lot of years. I didn't get to enjoy life. It took away the happiness of my life, that I could appreciate the things right now, that I could appreciate being alive right now, that I could appreciate the clothes that I can wear, the things that I have already rather than the things I don't have, because it takes away your blessings, and in taking away your blessings, they sound like cliche in that sense, but it's like I must constantly remind myself of how blessed I am, without feeling like shame or uncomfortable about it, and I don't. So that's all for today. Thank you for listening. For anybody who did, leave a comment below if you found any value with this or anything you would like to add to this discussion. And tune in next week. Thank you so much. Happy Sunday.